Running for mayor and managing a city of this level of complexity is different from having an idea. You have to actually be able to execute all the layers of doing so. And you know, those of you who carried the race, do you remember that day when that guy had me by 13 points in the poll? Andrew Yang, he was so happy on skateboards and you know, cherry faced, and all of a sudden people heard my message and those 13 points went to 1 point, and then all of a sudden I was up. This is the game of politics, and some people are gonna politicize this moment. I have to govern this city. That's what we're doing, and all of the crises that are coming with it. And every mayor I spoke with tell us about these moments where a lot of things happen at one time. And you have to be focused and disciplined enough to be able to still manage the city. And that's what we're doing. And that's my focus on continuing to manage this city. New York is a big place, and you have to have big ideas to move us forward.
Kelly?
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to get some more details about your trip to D.C. on Thursday. Who are you meeting with exactly? Is anybody else on the trip? And also, I wanted to get your thoughts. The comptroller yesterday saying that he revoked your emergency contracts for the migrants. What does that mean for you overall? And sorry, last question. Have you spoken to President Biden at all personally about the migrant crisis?
So let's peel it back in 3 levels. One, the trip to DC, we always announce what the schedule is going to be the day before. We're going to do it this time. I'm sure DM Levy is going to do that. The second question that you asked about the president, I have not communicated with the president since I think earlier this year. Was the last time I communicated with him, either earlier this year or late last year, around the same time. And your second question, I'm sorry?
About the comptroller and the fact
Yes.
that he revoked your emergency contracts.
Okay, you know, many of you heard me say over and over again for almost 20 months that I, you know, wanted him to join the other citywide leaders, Speaker Adrian Adams and Public Advocate Jamani Williams, to go to DC. He went to DC 20 months later, and he came back with tying our hands. That's just sort of defies logic to me, that we have to make these quick decisions on dealing with these contracts and dealing with placing people in housing. So I'm a little disappointed that when he turned from DC, he didn't come back with any real answers on, this is a national problem. I think we're over 150,000 now. And national leaders and international leaders have admired what we were able to accomplish without the support. And I just really think that's where the controller's attention should be on how do we get support from Washington, D.C. To pick up this cost. It should not be on the backs of New York City taxpayers. And you know, we're going to continue to, you know, navigate this process. Deputy Mayor Williams, I assume you probably could go into what his decision, how it's going to directly impact us.
Or I was also just going to talk about the fact that we have a group of people here, 20 cities that are here now, cities in action that have all come, their mayor's office of immigrant affairs, and everyone is struggling with the issues that we're talking about of having migrants come to their cities and basically having to deal with it on their own and come up with solutions. Today I have a conversation with the folks in Massachusetts because you all know that they've used one of the tools that we have as cities, which are time limits, and they've now put a cap on families with children. So they have the wait list that they're using and have people using hospitals and other places of that sort. Chicago yesterday, I was able to meet with a sister deputy mayor that's talking about folks in tents in front of the police station, and they're trying desperately to get them out of those tents before the cold weather comes. And so we are in this place that we've talked about since the spring of 2022, that without additional help, and I want to be clear, I am grateful for what the federal government has done thus far, but clearly it's not enough. When we see more and more cities struggling with this, when we have Governor Abbott sending out a tweet saying that he's going to send thousands of migrants to cities. That can't be appropriate, that can't be okay, and you all can ask us about, you know, places here and how we are doing our operations on our response. But I think as New Yorkers, all of us have to stand together and to ask the federal government to give us the support that we need, because it's not fair to the migrants that we have, and it's also not fair to us as New Yorkers.
And the
Mayor
Yes.
Tyson just made a very good point, that we all have to stand together. And so, Governor Abbott and others are sending thousands of people more. Last week we had 36,600.
Yeah, last week we had 3,600 new migrants coming into New York City, and you all remember the numbers were in the low 2000s, and it keeps on going up and down. We get ghost buses that just come in the middle of the night. We don't know if it's gonna be families with children or single adults. It doesn't make any sense, and I think that there are solutions that we need, so we need the comptroller and everyone to stand with us together, to say that we need the federal government to help us to coordinate what's happening, and so that we will be better able to serve people, especially as the cold weather is coming now.
And this is an emergency that requires sometimes emergency spending. We don't know how many migrants Texas is gonna send us, or whoever else is gonna send
Yeah,
us.
and it's an emergency, man-made emergency, is what I would say, and I think that we have to work together to avert the crisis that we are undergoing. And so tying our hands and flexibility, as you can imagine, is very important to us as we do this. When we say that no families and children have slept on the street, that's not just based on hope, right? That's based on us doing and making sure that we have what we need available. So anybody who wants to think that what they need to do at this time is to try to limit us, I don't get how you get to that conclusion. We are concerned about the budget. We are cutting the budget by 20%. We are going to do that. We're gonna find efficiencies, but we need support. We don't need people pointing fingers at us.
And I just wanna clarify that emergency procurement is about the time frame it takes to get a contract registered. And we were happy to partner with Comptroller during the transition, because we know how long it takes. If we had gone through the regular process, we would still probably be waiting for the first contract to be registered with 150,000 people in the city of New York. So it is about the process and the system and the time frame. It still goes under review. There's a vetting that takes place. So I think it's really important to understand. And so when you have 3,600 people coming in a week and you need to house them, you need to be able to act quickly, and you cannot wait 12 months for a contract to be registered.
Yes. Mr. Mayor, in your recent article to the ethnic and community media, you mentioned that affordable and safe housing is key to the prosperity. So when the federal government abandoned $80 billion to this NYCHA project, how are you going to fix this critical issue we are talking about, crisis? And my second question to I think Mr. Michael, that you are talking about the numbers of crimes or shooting in the city from 500 to 600. Do you think so? These numbers are good enough for a safer and secure city, please?
Yeah, let's do GM first, okay?
Thank you for the question, in particular about NYCHA. And so it is critically important that we do everything that we can to protect and preserve that really important source of affordable housing for New Yorkers. 1 in 17 New Yorkers live in NYCHA housing. As you mentioned, the capital needs to bring NYCHA to a state of good repair, that number is pretty staggering. It's about $80 billion. And that is due to decades of disinvestment and underinvestment from too many levels of government. That changed on day one of Mayor Eric Adams' administration. This has meant for us in terms of supporting NYCHA and really supporting the type of transformation that's needed. It's meant a few things. Number one, it has meant that we, as part of our housing plan, NYCHA is chapter 1. So it's really central to how we think about housing in this city. 2, we have in this administration, together with a lot of support from NYCHA tenant leaders and with state colleagues, had the first NYCHA trust legislation get signed. And I'm happy to report, I think everyone has seen, that there are now 2 developments that are voting for their futures and choosing between either PACT or PACT RAD or the trust, or to stay in Section 9. The first was Nostrum Houses, and their voting actually wraps up on December 7th. And we just announced yesterday that the Bronx River Addition, 2 buildings, about 130 households, is the next site to vote on their future. This year as well, we've seen more than 20,000 units now in total since inception of the program convert into PACT. We've seen $1 billion In capital repairs, that's another record high in NYCHA. And I'm laying this all out because I want to be very clear that I don't think any administration has really taken the issues at NYCHA as seriously as we have. And it also includes, just a couple of weeks ago, getting more than $100 million in rent arrears to NYCHA residents because they were left out of the original legislation. I could go on and on, I know others have questions, but I think our record is clear. And over the course of the last 2 years, we have really turned over every stone because, as the mayor has said time and time again, the cavalry is not coming in terms of doing the type of transformation that NYCHA residents deserve.
So just to get back, so I think the NYPD understands better than anybody about, there's a victim behind each one of these numbers that I'm giving. We don't lose sight of that at all. Yeah, there's persistent challenges that we are facing, and we're looking to get to the levels that we saw in 2018, 2019, and I'm confident that we can get there. And if we do, we're gonna continue to even drive crime down even further. So we're a relentless agency, just like all the city agencies, and we will never ever sleep on anything until crime is at acceptable levels. When it comes to perception, we understand perception. There's no doubt about it. And we always want the perception to be closest to the reality. And we look at all indicators when it comes to perception. We look at quality of life calls. We look at types of crimes. What types of assaults are happening in the transit system? What type of burglaries are happening in New York City? Our car thefts down. We look at street crime. We look at inside crime. There's everything that we look at, delay program. We are a data-driven organization. We're about precision, and we're about keeping New Yorkers safe.
Chief, could I add just, one thing, if you're talking about perception of crime versus reality of crime, I would just remind people where we were when we came into office in January of 2022. I remember my first week on the job. Every single night I was in the hospital with Mayor Adams and Police Commissioner Sewell. This was another officer shot, and in the middle of the week, an 11-month-old baby was shot in the head. That week was ended with the double murder of Detectives Rivera and Mora. That was a horrible week. I'm sure everyone remembers that. A lot of you folks were in the hospital that night. We are in a very different place today, 25% down of reduction in shootings. You don't understand what that means to people across the city.
And if I could just add, when you look at the enforcement, and when I talk about enforcement, our CompStat meetings that I share on Thursday with the chief of the department and all the bureau chiefs, we are looking at precision, right? So, what types of quality of life offenses are we issuing? Where are we making the arrests? Who are we arresting? And every indicator for the men and women out there are increases in quality enforcement, and decreases in 5 out of 7 major crimes. You're talking about, right now, 668 less shooting victims than 2 years ago. That's a staggering number. And that's not by surprise. It's by hard work, it's by precision policing, but again, who's doing that work is the New York City police officers out there every day.
Mike.
Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
I got a couple of questions on the Turkey investigation. Mr. Mayor, have you received a target letter from federal authorities? Have you received an official request to go before the grand jury in that matter? And just in general for everyone on the dais, if the answer to that question is yes, applied to you, could you just please raise your hand in the interest of saving time?
In the interest of time, thanks, Mike.
I'm trying to save time.
I'm just gonna jump in here and say the answer is no. And we can move on to the next question.
Right.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to circle back on your next DC trip. So circle back on your next Washington D.C. trip. Have you reached out to the Biden administration to set up a meeting for Thursday? And this will be, I think, your 10th trip down there. What do you expect to come back with to New York City with that? And then if I could just have one other question on the, for the deputy mayor here. There was a sprint to a census to collect all the information on all asylum seekers that have been in the city's care. It was a few months ago now. Is that done? And how many are work eligible that still have not received permits? And what have you done now at this point too? Because that was obviously a sprint to get it all done. Like, have you changed your systems? so we have kind of a rolling census of who's in your care.
And you're right, this is the 10th trip. And, you know, what I've learned in government, that what you don't accomplish on one conversation, you have to keep repeating and continue to show the evidence of the things that you're asking for. And that's the goal here. Our Director of Intergovernmental Affairs is coordinating the trip, setting up the meetings, and as I indicated, Wednesday, we will release exactly who we're going to meet with. But the goal is constantly go there, be front and center, and raise the concerns of how this is impacting our city. And that's the goal.
And have you reached out to the White House for a meeting?
The Intergovernmental Affairs is communicating with all the parties that are involved in Washington D.C. that have a major impact on what's taking place here in New York City.
Oh, and,
Yeah,
yeah.
just really quickly, so, yes, the assessments are, I think, about 93% done, but I'll get that example, get that for you, that number for you. Number of asylum applications filed are 7,294. Number of work authorization applications filed are 2,900. Number of TPS applications filed, 2,965. The federal work authorization sprints, you know, that the ones that we were doing with the federal government, 3,100, over 3,100 clients were processed during the 2 sprints. And I think we announced last week, or the week before last, that we opened another satellite site, maybe another 2 sites to keep on doing applications. And then I'll give you the exact number of how many people have actually gotten their work authorization. And so we use that data to help figure out where people are, how can we connect them to employment, how do, you know, who's in a training program, who's in an apprenticeship program, so that we can make sure that people are getting connected to work, because obviously that is the way that we're gonna get people out of shelter and getting people settled.
But how, out of the population, how many are work eligible? Like
So I'm
overall?
gonna get that number for you.
Okay.
And I would also just point out the 10th trip, it's the 10th trip to discuss the asylum seeker, or the mayor has discussed the asylum seeker crisis. We've been down to DC more than 10 times since last year. Just want to make clear about that.
Good morning. My question is actually also for the mayor and for deputy mayor as well. About the involuntary removals update that y'all made last week. I didn't think y'all was gonna do that, so that's really cool.
Oh,
Thanks, sis. I appreciate it. I have something. My question is, so New York City's homeless population, a lot are made up of Black and brown New Yorkers. Is that also true for the involuntary removals that you're seeing? Like, is there a racial breakdown you keep track? And secondly, you know, if you're taken forcibly to the ER or something like that, let's say in Kings County, sometimes you can be sedated or handcuffed or restrained or given antipsychotics or something. So are you keeping track of that as well, or when that method is necessary to use? And who makes that decision? Should I start?
Yes, Steve.
So, thank you for saying that you were glad that we did the update. It was something that the mayor said to us over a year ago, that we just didn't want to walk by people who were clearly suffering. So I saw, you know, I know that is a big concern about the Black and brown folks. I will look to see whether or not the data that we have is broken down in that way. I think also we want to work on having a dashboard so that we can make sure that the data is transparent, right? We're not trying to hide, we're trying to learn from the data that we have. And I think we were up to about half of the people that were on our top 100 lists were able to get connected to treatment, which was such of a big deal, because it becomes the proof of concept of what works and what needs to happen. You point to the fact that we do have to work really closely with the hospitals to, you know, we've been able to give people a heads up when we're coming. We've been able to kind of coordinate. It's why it's so important to have a mental health person that's on that team when we're doing 958s. So again, I'll make sure that I get you the exact number of whether or not what actually happens. I know I'm sure some of that is protected by confidentiality, but being able to look at the trends and the data so that we're making sure that we are getting people the help that they need. And also those 1,000 beds that we were able to bring back online are so important, again, because you know those lines were offline during COVID. So I think all of those pieces together and the ongoing focus on this issue will really help us to make some progress and not violate people's rules in the end, and certainly look at the issues of equity as we work on that.
Mr. Mayor, just wondering, with these contracts, the comptroller doing what he is with the contracts, what are you guys gonna do instead? How are you guys gonna still make sure that these contracts are fulfilled and you guys can still build shelters? And then also, for the deputy mayor, I was just hoping you could help answer questions about the reticketing center. I know last week you guys implemented a new policy to make it easier. Just hoping you can go into details of that as well. Thank you guys.
Can I just jump in? Just
Mayor, with just a clarifying point, in case there's a misunderstanding. What the controller put out does not do away with emergency procurement in the city of New York. Agencies can still use the emergency procurement process, including for contracts relating to the asylum seeker process. So there shouldn't be that misconception. What it changed is that, and again, anything that slows us down is not a good thing, but what it changes is that it's a revocation for certain new contracts. There are exemptions for certain existing contracts, but certain things will require controller approval on a case by case. Each one requires controller approval for the permission to use the emergency procurement system, as opposed to what had earlier been issued, which gave a quote-unquote pre-approval for on a blanket basis for certain contracts of a particular type. So no one should have that misconception, and the city will still seek to use every contractual procurement tool that it has in order to meet the city's needs.
So on the reticketing site, you know what we've decided to do is that if there's a small percentage of people who are not able to leave in their 30-day time limit. So we have adults going to a reticketing center, and that's where you see the lines are building. We know that it's cold outside, so when it's cold outside, we're going to be finding places where people can wait. If they're not, while they're waiting, it could be for an ID card. It could be to get connected to somebody, a friend or a family member that's someplace else as they're continuing their journey.
Just to
But,
follow,
go ahead.
I'm sorry about that.
okay.
Just to follow up on the contracts real fast, so does that mean you guys are gonna be going primarily through like Oakland hospitals then to do these contracts?
Should it, you wanna start, cause it was a.
Who's good?
No, I think what Lisa was saying was that we are gonna go through our regular emergency contracting process. And she didn't want to give the implication that the announcement meant that we could no longer do emergency contracts. Is that what you're saying?
That's correct. It's also, no one should have the misconception that emergency procurement has been the only tool used for contracting relating to the asylum seeker process. There's an array of contracting tools that have been used. There are some long-standing requirements contracts that the city has. There have been all sorts of competitively bid contracts. There's just a whole range, and I think the point that we're making as a city is that we need every single tool at our resource, and we need contracting systems that work, and some that, when things cannot abide by delay, we need ways to work efficiently, mindful of budgetary issues, vetting issues, all of the things that are in place.
Dana. Thank you. Two questions, Mr. Mayor. First, there's a new report out today showing that most of the New Yorkers who've left New York City are lower and middle income New Yorkers, many of them people of color, and that we actually have more millionaires than we had before. Have you considered asking Albany for some sort of revenue raiser rather than cutting services for those New Yorkers who are leaving? Or that class of New Yorkers who are leaving? And then secondly, can you tell us
I'm
if
sorry,
you're...
you said a request for what for those?
Oh, like a revenue raiser from Albany, like raising taxes on millionaires or something. And then secondly, can you tell us if the lawyers representing you or the campaign have reported any other improper conduct to the government, aside from Reina Abasovas?
The council will talk about that, but we are hoping as the state starts this year that they will look at ways of ensuring that we can retain long-term New Yorkers, keep them here. And one of the ways we can do that is assist us more with the asylum seeker crisis that we're facing. Because when you do these efficiency cuts, it is going to hurt low-income New Yorkers. And listen, it's clear. One of the most important terms I heard is that the rent is too damn high. So cost of living is impacting all of us. And we need to make sure how we navigate ourselves through this difficult time, this economic time, together. And we're hoping to have that real partnership with our lawmakers when they return to Albany this year. and come up with real ways of how we can put money back in the pockets of New Yorkers. They helped us before with the earned income tax credit, what we've been able to do with the city council with reduced fare Metro cards. We found ways of putting money back in the pockets of New Yorkers, and we're hoping Albany will do that the same this year as well.
Mayor, just to add to that, I think another few important things. The investments we've made in making childcare more accessible is really, really important, and affordable, making it affordable for working families. Maria Torres Springer's team has been helping with our economic recovery. All of the nearly 1 million jobs lost during the pandemic have been recovered, and we've been putting forward an historic effort to build affordable homes here in New York City. So,
If I can just, on that very last point, it's no surprise to New Yorkers, they feel it every day, right? The rising cost of housing. And we have been in this crisis for way too long. It's also clear, there's no ambiguity in the empirical literature. All of the research shows, right, that more housing leads to more affordability. Less housing leads to people being squeezed out of the neighborhoods that they love and help build. So we're doing everything that we need to do on the city level, whether that's the record-breaking number of homes financed by HPD this past fiscal year, or the major City of Yes for housing opportunity to build more housing in every neighborhood. But as the mayor mentioned, we can't do this alone. We need Albany's help. We asked for certain tools last year. That conversation, discussion, negotiation, advocacy has to continue this year because there's just too much at stake. And working class New Yorkers have for too long felt the squeeze. So we'll continue to be as aggressive as possible with the tools that we have, and we have done that. And we'll continue to look to partners at the state level and at the federal level to ensure that they are not walking away from their obligations to support the working people of the city.
Lisa, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, as I've said previously, we're just not gonna do anything that impedes the SDNY's investigation. They have a review to do, let it run its course. Mayor, and we remain in a cooperative posture, noting that the mayor's not been accused of any wrongdoing.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I was getting worried I wasn't gonna get to ask my question. I would like to pivot to school safety.
Yes.
First of all, thank you for reinstating the class of school safety agents. They're starting this week. And I also understand that next week, all school safety agents will be receiving their bulletproof vests, so thank you. But Mr. Mayor, today, a 15-year-old was stabbed inside of Edward R. Murrow High School. It is a non-scanning school. I understand NYPD is doing reverse scanning. But Mr. Mayor, parents have raised concerns at Edward R. Murrow High School, specifically the co-founder of the New York City School Safety Coalition, Quyanne Simpkins, who has a child in that high school, for 2 years has been pushing for scanning. So, Mr. Mayor, what do you say to a parent like Ms. Simpkins, who is also a school safety agent, by the way, whose child attends Murrow, and to the other parents out there who are concerned about school safety and who do want more scanning in our high schools?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you did emphasize who do want. I'm a believer in scanning to keep schools safe, but as you know, there's a balance because there are a large number of parents that also push back on scanning. There are a large number of parents who push back on even school safety agents being in schools. And I continue to state that I was not going to accept the removal of school safety agents from school. And so the police department and the Department of Education and school safety leaders, they're going to continue to do an analysis to determine which schools we should have those scanners. And we're continuously looking at ways of having non-intrusive scanners, because we have a balance of protecting our children without damaging that they're feeling as though we're turning into some form of jail-type atmosphere. Because young people have also raised their voice on that feeling as well. So we're trying to find the right balance but at the same time, keeping our children safe.
Thank
Mark,
you.
Mark, did you have a question?
How you doing, Mr. Mayor?
How are you?
Good, good. I just wanted to ask, how often are you meeting with your attorneys in talks about this federal investigation? And how are you balancing, managing the city coupled with meeting with your attorneys and defending yourself against whatever this investigation might open?
Okay, so I'm not gonna go into my meeting schedule and, you know, what I do, with, my legal team, on all the way around. Managing the city, if you go back from day one, there's always something going on in this city. And I shared with you over and over again, every mayor that I've communicated with, stated, don't wake up every day hoping that there's not another crisis going on. Wake up hoping for the strength to be able to do that. And I do have the strength to do that. All the different crises, from the COVID to the migrants, to whatever comes up. I have a good team. They know their roles. They're carrying out their roles. I have a lot of confidence in my team here. And that is why we do these briefings, so you can see that this is not the Eric Adams show. This is the Eric administration's show. And so we're gonna continue to do that, manage this city and navigate us out of this crisis.
Have you had to rely more on them because of the investigation?
I'm sorry?
Have you had to rely more on your team because of this investigation? Like if, for instance, if you had to meet with your lawyers as opposed to doing something that somebody else had to handle? Like, is
My
that
team, they have always been in place, the same level of carrying out their roles is still the same. You know, when I speak to a team member, we do our briefings in the morning, everyone knows what has to be done, and I know my role, and we have continued to do that. And so there's not a greater need to lean on this team. It's the same level. I've always been a hands-on person from the time of my first days in public service. It's gonna continue to be that way.
Thank you. Can I just follow up on Morgan's question? I am still trying to understand exactly what will change under this emergency contracting situation. Can you give us an example of what won't change and what will change or slow you down? Like in real terms on the ground in terms of managing migrants. What will this impact or not impact?
You know, I would suggest that, I would refer you to what Comptroller Lander put out, because I'm not gonna go into it here, but you'll see, that there are a number of specifics in there, including, an attempt by Comptroller Lander to say what it does not impact at all. And I would say that, you know, we continue internally to speak internally about this, so I don't wanna overstep. We're in discussion with the contracting, division of the law department and corp counsel on this issue. But I think the main message is that we at the city will do whatever we need to do to meet the moment. Emergency procurement remains a tool. We fully expect that if and when we need to continue to go to Comptroller Lander on emergency procurement cases, that he and his staff will be fully cooperative and attentive to the needs and the purpose of it.
Just to follow up, is there a scenario where there are pieces of this that you're not on the same page about, where the city will continue to move forward, not in agreement with him because you have an emergent situation on the ground?
I'm optimistic that the controller and his staff will work with us, and that when emergency procurement is necessary, will be supportive and understand the need to get things done without delay.
Yeah, my name is Lodi, I'm from Pakistan. I'm just asking you, you have any special instruction about the Muslim mosque? Mostly all the mosques, many of them, especially in Long Island, last 2 weeks before, the Southern Mosque was vandalized, and the prayer people, they just coming for prayer, they got beaten, and in Flushing also. Do you have any special instruction for the mosque?
Yeah, and I received a report this morning that someone vandalized the vehicle with Islamophobic statements and anti-black statements as well. listen, there's no place for hate in our city. We've made that clear, and where we will give instructions like we did with all of our communities. See something, say something, and also do something. Notify the NYPD. We've made great investigations and great apprehensions of those who have participated in some of the violence that we're seeing. And so we are saying those who are members of all of our faith institutions to remain vigilant, you know, during the time of prayer, remain vigilant during the time of service. And we have our police officers that are doing what's called special assignments that are very conscious of the religious institutions in their precinct boundaries. It is unfortunate that some people are using this as an opportunity to display hate, and we're going to remain steadfast. If you do something that's a hate crime, then we're going to hold you accountable, no matter who you are.
We're going to go into our last couple because we're running out of time. Annie?
Thank you. On the shelter stay limits, I know that the city officially isn't keeping track of those who move out of the shelter system, and where they go next. Are any attempts made to sort of follow people where they go, or is there a general understanding of whether most people are moving out of the city, moving into even safe and secure environments next? And what is being done to make sure that those who have started asylum applications, work applications, are still able to receive their mail and any other, essential notices as far as that process, wherever they move next, if their, first address was with the city shelter?
DM?
Yep, on the first question, thank you for that, because we've gotten a lot of partners who really want to do some research, a longer research project for us, and really look at where, sorry Dana, I'm trying to figure out where people are going and how they're doing. So I think that's going to be a longer research project, and maybe we'll work with the migration policy research folks or get some philanthropic money to do that. So that's on that question. We are doing a deep dive into the people who are not seeming to be able to find their way. What populations, why is it, what do they need? That's part of the intensive case management. And the other part of your question was?
When someone starts a asylum application,
mail. Yeah, I don't know if you've come to any of the asylum seeker legal clinics. If somebody is in one of the NISM sites, we have the mail going there. It's such an important part. I know a lot of people have their phones now, so we're able to check on their phones, but we're being very careful with where the mail goes and how it goes, because people need to get that.
but it's able to follow them where
Yes.
they're going next?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, Community Board 7 in Queens just approved the construction on Willis Point. And it includes a stadium, a school, and also 2,500 affordable housing. So what the city is going to do to make sure that it's 100% affordable housing and the community has access to that?
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. There was a really important vote last night of Community Board 7, I believe 37-2, I believe, in support of the Willits Point Phase 2 project. And just as a reminder for everyone, this really will bring to life what's been a decades-long set of plans and visions, but under this administration, we're making real progress. So it will include the city's first soccer-specific stadium, 2,500 units of housing, a hotel, much-needed infrastructure, and open space, and more than 14,000 jobs and $6 billion in economic impact. So that's the project. To your question about affordable, it was really critical to us that not only was the project fully affordable, so the 2,500 units, that's 100% affordable housing, but it was critical, and this was a commitment that we made last year and we're delivering on it, that the first phase, the first 800 units of this project, that we broke ground a year ahead of schedule. And so there's more to come on that, but we're making good on that promise that we made last year. It's the type of project, to remind everyone, we're building a whole new neighborhood at Willits Point. This is the first project, one of the first projects I ever worked on when I started in government about 20 years ago. And so the ability to make sure that we are bringing a project like this to life for the benefit not just of the residents of Queens, but really, given our affordable housing crisis, New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs is really gratifying.
We're gonna do the last question, is that what
All right. Mr. Mayor, how are you? My question is, you're going to Washington D.C. day after tomorrow, and can you tell us how much funds do you city needs right away to deal with migrant crisis out of $12 billion, which will be needed for the next 3 years to come? And if you come empty-handed from Washington D.C., what would that means to New Yorkers and the city cut already city mates to different services?
Well, we believe this cost should be picked up by the federal government, not only what is this fiscal year, but for the next 2 fiscal years. And Jacques Jiha, the director of OMB, has made it clear this is a $12 billion price tag over the 3 years. And this is a national problem. We have been paying the cost of that. And we believe that the federal government should pick up the tab. And if I come back empty-handed, as you indicated, we're going to continue our advocacy, and we're hoping that all of our local electeds on the state and city level join the coalition that we have been able to create. As the deputy mayor stated, we have a coalition of cities that are here, and they're talking about the impact of this crisis on their cities. And that coalition is getting louder, more organized, and they're clearly saying the same things, that this is a national problem that should not fall on the backs of local cities. And we've been clear on that.
Okay, thanks, folks.
We take a few.
Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe.